The road had narrowed for miles, until it felt like I was driving through the hollow ribs of some great forgotten beast. The trees pressed in on either side, ancient, crooked things with moss-draped limbs that reached across the path like they were trying to remember something. Rain tapped against the windshield in a soft, persistent rhythm, barely needing the wipers. I let it play its pattern, comforting in a way, like a lullaby with no melody. By the time I saw the lake, I'd almost missed it. It wasn't announced by a clearing or a scenic overlook. It simply emerged from the mist like a dream, as if it had always been there, waiting.
It's all white, gray.
The surface was so calm it seemed unnatural. Not glassy, not reflective, but matte like dark velvet under a veil of rain. It didn't ripple, not even once. The cottage stood just beyond the shore, hunched and modest like it didn't want to be noticed. Two small windows faced the lake, their panes beaded with moisture. The roof sagged slightly in the middle, and ivy curled up one side like a reaching hand. There was no welcome sign, no paved driveway, just a patch of grass slick with mud, and a narrow trail of flat stones leading to the door. I stepped out of the car and immediately felt the world go quieter. Not just the muffled hush that comes with rain, but something deeper, like a blanket of soundlessness had been placed over everything. No bird song, no insects, just the faint hiss of drizzle and my own breath. The key was exactly where the owner said it would be, inside a rusted tin box nailed to the frame of the door. I turned it in the lock. The doorknob was cold and slightly sticky. The scent hit me the moment it creaked open. Damp wood soaked over seasons. The kind of smell that settles deep into the bones of a house. But underneath that, there was something else. Something still. Like the smell of an old aquarium after the water's been drained, but the memory of it remains. It wasn't unpleasant, just odd. Familiar in a way I couldn't quite place. Inside, the house welcomed me with quiet. No electricity yet, I'd have to find the breaker. But even in the gray light, I could see that everything had been left as it must have been decades ago. A faded couch with crochet blankets. A wooden table with a single chair. A clock on the wall, its hands stopped at 4:13. Shelves filled with books whose titles were too dusty to read. I dropped my bag by the door and let out a long breath. It felt like I hadn't exhaled properly in weeks. Months maybe. I'd needed this nothingness, this slowness, the silence. I told myself it was just a writing retreat, that I needed to disconnect. But really I'd come to vanish for a while, to stop being seen, or maybe to see something I'd forgotten. The bedroom was small but clean, a metal frame bed with soft, creaky springs. The sheets smelled faintly of cedar. The window looked out onto the lake, though in the mist, you could only see a few feet out before the world turned to pale gray. I unpacked slowly. Socks, a sweater, my notebook. It felt strange how easily I slipped into this life as if I had always belonged here. By early evening, the rain hadn't stopped, and I hadn't seen another soul since I arrived. I lit a few candles I found tucked in the kitchen drawer. Their flickering light made the shadows dance on the wooden walls, slow and lazy. There was an old kettle on the stove. I filled it, set it on the burner, and waited, listening to the rising warmth of the boil. I stepped outside for a moment, just to feel the air. It was colder than I expected. The lake was still invisible beyond the mist, but I could hear it now. Not waves exactly, but small, slow movements like something turning beneath the surface. I told myself it was just the wind, but the trees weren't moving. Back inside, tea in hand, I sat by the window and watched the rain trace paths across the glass. The silence was so complete, I could hear the soft groan of the house adjusting its weight. It wasn't lonely. It felt watched in the way a painting feels watched. Passive, silent. So, I don't know how long I sat there. Time seemed unimportant. Eventually, I drifted off in the chair, the mug cooling in my hand. I dreamt, though I couldn't remember what of when I woke, only that it was slow, heavy, like I was underwater looking up at a surface I couldn't reach. When I stirred, the candle had nearly gone out, the wax pooled thick and warm. The rain was louder now, a steady rhythm against the roof, like footsteps one floor up. I shook the thought from my head. There was nothing here but me. And the lake. Always the lake. I locked the front door before bed, not out of fear, but habit. The bedroom was quiet, too quiet. I opened the window slightly to let in the sound of the rain. It helped. I lay on the bed, listening to it fall, slow and patient. And in between the drops, I thought I could hear something else. Something softer, like a breath being held just outside the house. It was probably nothing. Still, I pulled the covers higher and told myself again that I came here for the silence. And the silence welcomed me. The rain came in waves through the night, soft at first, then heavier, like a sigh deepening into a breath. I lay beneath the covers, the candle long since extinguished, the room shrouded in that particular darkness only known in remote places. No street lights, no hum of passing cars. Just the soft sound of rain on the roof, and the occasional, almost delicate lap of water against the lake's shore. I hadn't realized how unfamiliar silence could feel. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of quiet. A thick, listening sort of quiet, like the house itself was waiting. I tried to focus on the patterns of sound, the rain tapping on the tin roof, the wind curling around the corners of the cottage, the way the walls would creak every now and then as if remembering something. It was peaceful. It should have been peaceful. But I couldn't sleep. I turned on my side, eyes half open, adjusting to the faint outline of the window. The lake was out there. Hidden in fog, blanketed by rain, but always there. I found myself wondering, oddly, how deep it really was. No one had mentioned it in the listing. There were no boats, no piers, no signs of fishing or swimming. Just the still water, quiet and patient. Eventually I got up, not for any real reason. I wasn't thirsty. I wasn't cold. I just felt drawn. The hallway outside the bedroom was only dimly lit by moonlight filtering through the mist and glass. I passed a mirror hanging opposite the coat hooks, a tall, narrow thing with an old brass frame tarnished at the edges. In the darkness, I could barely see myself, just a shimmer of a figure like a memory behind glass. But something caught my eye. The surface of the mirror wasn't quite right. It curved ever so slightly, not enough to notice in daylight, but in the half-light it distorted things. My reflection, though faint, didn't feel like it was doing what I was. When I tilted my head, it moved just a heartbeat too late. And the background behind me, though mostly shadow, seemed fluid, like water. I blinked, leaned closer. The glass shimmered faintly, not like a reflection, like a ripple, and then it was gone. Still again. Just my shadowy face, surrounded by shadowy walls. I stepped away and told myself it was just the old mirror, warped with time and damp air. This house had seen decades. It was natural, normal. Back in bed, I finally started to drift. The soft hush of rain lulled me into a kind of half-sleep, the place where dreams thread themselves into waking thoughts. I dreamt of water, not the surface of the lake, but beneath it, deep beneath, deeper than should have been possible. In the dream, I was sinking slowly, not struggling, just drifting downward through cool blue-black water. The light faded. My hands reached upward, but not in panic, just to test how far the surface had gone. There were no plants, no fish, no lake bed, just the endless descent. And then, faintly, something brushed past me. I turned slowly, dreamlike, and saw nothing, but I felt it, a presence, not malicious, not even curious, just aware. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the room. The candle had burned down completely. A dim gray light had begun to settle over the horizon. Morning maybe, or a version of it. I lay there for a while, unsure why my heart felt slower than it should, like it hadn't caught up to me yet. Then I felt it, dampness. I sat up and pulled the covers back. My socks were wet. Not just damp, not like sweat or condensation, but soaked from heel to toe. Cold and heavy, like they'd been standing in shallow water. But the bed was dry. The floor was dry. The window was still closed. I peeled the socks off carefully, heart barely beating in the hush of early light. There were no puddles, no leaks, just me, and the rain outside, which continued with the same steady rhythm, unbothered by my questions. I stood up and checked the floor again, crouching low, running my hands along the wooden boards. Nothing, not a trace of water, but the smell was back, that still water scent, like the memory of something submerged. And as I stood there just for a moment, I thought I heard a sound, faint and distant, like something dripping onto a stone floor. 1, 2, 3. Then silence. I looked down at my hands. They weren't wet. I looked at the window. The mist was still clinging to the glass. I looked at the mirror, barely visible through the crack in the bedroom door. It was dark again, reflecting nothing. I should have been frightened, but instead I felt watched, not threatened, just known. I sat back on the bed, placed the damp socks on the floor beside me, and listened to the rain, to the quiet, to something else breathing beneath it all. And I whispered into the stillness, unsure why. I remember now, though I didn't know what. Not yet. Morning crept in slowly, gray and muted, as if the sky itself had not quite woken yet. The mist had thickened outside the window, curling its fingers around the porch railing, hiding the lake almost completely. The rain had not stopped. It whispered across the roof like an old lullaby, soft, steady, endless. I hadn't planned on unpacking. Not yet. But something about the cottage, with its stillness and half-forgotten corners, urged me to explore. Not out of curiosity exactly, more out of the need to fill the silence. In the bedroom stood a heavy wooden dresser, the kind that smelled faintly of cedar and old mothballs. Its handles were ornate but dulled with time, and the drawers groaned slightly when opened, as if stretching after a long sleep. Most were empty. A few scraps of paper, a lone button, a folded shopping list written in loopy cursive. Then, in the second drawer from the bottom, nestled beneath a thin layer of dust, I found it. A journal. Small, hand-bound in worn brown leather. The cover was faded, the edges soft with age. I ran my fingers over it slowly, the way one might touch a sleeping animal, gentle, cautious. The pages were thick, yellowed, the ink faded but legible. I carried it over to the window seat, where the light was soft but steady, and began to read. At first, the entries were charming in their simplicity. June 3, 1991. Cool morning. Saw loons out on the water. Trout biting better than last week. Repaired the screen door. May rain tonight. June 5th. Cloudy. Fog heavy in the morning, rolled and thicker than usual. Sound carries strangely across the lake. Heard what I thought was someone calling, but couldn't see anyone. Probably just the wind. Ducks are nesting again near the rocks. June 7th. Rain again. Spent most of the day indoors. Started carving that new decoy. Watched the reflection on the water for hours. Still not sure why. It went on like that, peaceful, mundane. Fishing notes, weather patterns, wildlife observations. The kind of journal kept by someone who loved solitude. Someone who found comfort in routine. But then, slowly, the tone began to shift. June 14th. Reflection today didn't look right. Water perfectly still, and yet, when I moved, it didn't move with me. I waved my hand. Nothing. Stood up, and the reflection just sat there. Watching. Didn't like it. June 16th. Didn't sleep. The wind knocked something over on the porch last night, but when I went out, nothing was there. Just wet footprints. Only two side by side facing the door. Too large to be mine. June 17th. Heard it again. Under the dock this time. Something shifting. Breathing. Not like an animal. Too slow. Too deliberate. I paused, one hand resting on the open page, my fingertips pressing lightly against the ink as if to test whether it was real. The rain ticked softly on the window beside me, and I turned to look out at the lake. Still shrouded in mist. Still silent. Still waiting. I turned back to the journal. June 19th. I saw it, or part of it, something just beneath the surface. Not a fish, not a shadow. It blinked. The water shimmered around it. I didn't move for nearly an hour. June 21st. I covered the mirrors, every last one. It's easier that way. They don't show what I want anymore. They show the other place, the deep place. I think it's inside now. June 23rd. There's a voice in the house, faint, like someone thinking in a whisper, but the words aren't mine. My breath slowed. The words felt heavy in my chest, as though the paper itself remembered what had been written. There were only a few entries left. June 24th. I know it hears me, even when I don't speak. The water listens. It's in the sounds, the dripping, the ripples, the way the wind skips across the surface like it's speaking in code. I tried to leave. The car wouldn't start. The phone gives nothing but static now. June 25th. It's not just watching anymore. I think it wants to be remembered, to be known. I keep dreaming of drowning, but not with fear, with familiarity, like returning. June 26th. It's listening. That was the last page. No signature, no goodbye, just those two words, underlined once shakily. I sat in stillness for a long time, listening to the rain as it brushed against the cottage roof. The same roof it must have whispered across over 30 years ago, when that last entry was written. The room seemed colder now, the kind of cold that settles in still water. I closed the journal carefully, like sealing something inside. My fingers lingered on the cover, almost afraid to let go. It wasn't just a book. It felt like an echo of someone else's solitude, or perhaps a warning. And then I heard it, outside, a ripple. Soft, unmistakable, as if something had broken the surface of the lake, just once. No splash, no wind, just the gentle hush of water disturbed. I didn't move, I didn't breathe. The sound passed quickly, swallowed by the steady rhythm of rain, but it had been real. I stood and placed the journal back in the drawer, not out of fear, but out of reverence. Whatever it was, it wasn't finished. Not yet. I turned to the window. The mist still clung to the trees, and though I couldn't see the water, I could feel it watching. The morning came with no breeze. The trees stood in still reverence, their leaves unmoving, and yet the lake was restless. I sat on the porch wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping lukewarm tea, watching the mist drift lazily across the water. The rain had paused for the moment, but the silence it left behind felt incomplete, like something forgotten mid-sentence. The surface of the lake should have been glass, perfectly still, reflecting the sky in soft grays. But it wasn't. I noticed it first as a flicker at the corner of my vision. Ripples. Gentle, concentric rings disturbing the water. But they weren't moving outward the way raindrops or pebbles would cause them to. They were moving inward, toward a central point. Again and again, small circles tightening slowly, as though the lake itself was breathing, drawing something in. I set down my cup, stepping closer to the edge of the porch. No bird song, no rustling of wind through the trees. Only the slow draw of the ripples converging on a place I couldn't see clearly through the mist. Something about it unsettled me. Not fear exactly, but a pull. A strange, subtle gravity I didn't yet understand. By afternoon, the rain had returned, soft, unhurried, tapping on the tin roof in a steady rhythm. The kind of rain that makes you think of lullabies. The kind that belongs to memories you never quite lived. I put on my coat and stepped outside, my boots pressing into the spongy soil with quiet sighs. The path to the dock was slick with moss and thyme, but I took it slowly, drawn forward not by curiosity, but by a whisper of instinct. The lake stretched before me like a forgotten mirror, blurred by the mist and the gentle rain. The ripples had faded now, but I could feel their echo in the air, like a drum that had stopped beating but left its vibration behind. I crouched at the edge of the dock and reached out. The moment my fingers touched the water, I knew something was wrong. It was warm. Not just warmer than the air, unnaturally warm. Like a bath left for too long or breath trapped beneath a blanket. A quiet, smothering warmth that didn't belong in the middle of a rainy forest. And yet, the surface held its calm, even as that warmth crept up my fingers and into my wrist, like something alive, something curious. I pulled my hand back, heart slow but alert, and wiped it dry against my jeans. The whispering began that night. It started subtly, the kind of sound you almost write off as a trick of the ear. I lay in bed, wrapped in a thick quilt, listening to the rain tapping on the window pane. It was soothing at first, familiar. But beneath it, just beneath, was something else. A sound that didn't match the room. It was like water, but not from the outside. This was closer, inside. A soft sloshing like slow waves against stone. I sat up, listening. The lake was too far to hear like that, and the house had no plumbing near the bedroom. And yet, the sound seemed to seep through the walls, gentle, rhythmic, as if something was brushing up against the wood from the inside. I got up quietly, not turning on the light, and padded through the hallway in my socks. The boards creaked faintly beneath me, though I barely felt my feet touch them. I pressed my ear to the wall. There it was, unmistakable now. A sound like water swirling in a basin, or maybe a deep breath released beneath the surface. And layered beneath that was a voice, faint, gurgling, like someone speaking underwater. I couldn't understand the words, if they were words at all. They slipped through comprehension like smoke through fingers. But the tone, it wasn't angry. It wasn't pleading either. It was close, intimate, like someone murmuring a secret directly into my ear through layers of time and liquid. I stepped back, my breath fogging the cool air of the hallway. The lights flickered once, then steadied. I didn't sleep that night. Not fully. I lay in bed with the covers pulled high, listening as the house shifted around me, settling deeper into something I couldn't name. The whispers would come and go, sometimes fading into the rain, other times brushing against the edge of my consciousness like a half-remembered song. And the oddest part? I wasn't afraid. Not exactly. There was something almost familiar in the cadence of the sound, as though I had heard it once before, long ago, maybe in a dream or from a lullaby hummed beside a cradle. A language not meant for waking minds, but for something deeper. By dawn, the whispers had faded again, swallowed by the hush of early morning and the soft lapping of the lake. But the warmth had lingered. My room, though untouched by fire or heater, felt almost humid. The air was thick, clinging. And when I opened the window to let the breeze in, I saw the ripples again. Just for a moment, moving inward, as though the lake was still listening, still waiting, still breathing. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle by late afternoon, little more than a sigh against the eaves. I wrapped myself in the same wool blanket, now faintly carrying the scent of the cottage. Old wood, faint smoke, and something wetter, earthier. The lake seemed almost still again, though the clouds had settled heavy over it, diffusing the light until the world looked dipped in slate and silver. I carried a cup of tea down to the dock. The boards were slicked beneath my feet, the wood darkened from years of water and time. Everything around me felt older than I'd noticed before, like I'd only just begun to see past the thin layer of dust and memory. The lake stretched out before me in endless gray, a mirror again. But as the sun began to fall, not set, just dim, as if someone turned the world's volume knob down, something changed. A glow, just beneath the surface. It was faint, like candlelight seen through fogged glass, but unmistakably there. A soft, golden shimmer that drifted slowly beneath the water, perhaps 30 feet from the dock. It wasn't the sun, the angle was wrong. And it moved, not with the waves but against them. A slow glide like something swimming or floating. I leaned forward, clutching the edges of the blanket. The rain tapped softly on my shoulders in the dock, a lullaby rhythm that only heightened the stillness. The light paused, hovered, then blinked out. Not faded, not drifted away, just gone. I waited a long time, breath shallow, heart slow, unsure if I had imagined it. But even after the surface returned to its calm, I could feel the memory of that light still glowing behind my eyes, like it had imprinted itself there, quiet and watching. That night I dreamt again. The dreams had been deepening night after night, but this one felt closer, realer. In the dream I was in the lake, not swimming, sinking, silently, peacefully. The water was cold only at the surface. Below that it grew warmer, stranger. I drifted downward through thickening darkness, past the lightless green where fish should have lived, deeper than a lake should have allowed. And far below, nestled in the murky black like a forgotten relic, was a house. The same shape as the cottage above, but sunken, tilted slightly to one side, shrouded in shadows that pulsed like breathing. Its windows glowed faintly golden, just like the light I'd seen earlier. I drifted down toward it, not afraid, not struggling, just remembering. And that's what chilled me most. Somewhere in that drifting quiet, I felt it not as a dream, but as a return, as if I had been there before, as if I had left something behind. I woke with the taste of water in my mouth. The quilt was damp where my arms had lain, as though I brought the lake back with me. My hands tingled with cold. And when I sat up, blinking against the pale morning light, I noticed something odd. My fingernails. They were dark underneath, packed with something. I walked slowly to the small bathroom, lit only by the soft gray pouring through the window, and held my hands under the tap. The water ran clear, but the dirt beneath my nails remained. I scraped at it with a nail file gently. Silt. Fine, grainy lake silt. The kind that settles at the bottom, far below the reeds and fish. Not the type you'd find on a boot or the edge of the dock. No, this was deeper. And it was under my nails like I had been clawing through it in sleep. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The glass was still subtly warped, just enough to make the corners of the room behind me seem to shimmer like water. My eyes looked darker than I remembered, heavier, but not tired, anchored. I told myself it was sleep, stress, imagination. I told myself the silt had come from a walk I forgot I took, or from touching something outside. I told myself a lot of things, but that glow beneath the lake, that was real, that was waiting. As I returned to the living room and stood before the window, I saw the lake stretching wide once more, still under the mist, silver in the rain. But in my mind I saw the house beneath, and it was calling me, softly, steadily, the way deep water always does. It began with the floor. A subtle tremor I almost didn't feel, like a single breath passing through the wooden planks beneath my feet. At first, I thought it was the storm shifting the house on its old bones. But the rain had quieted to a thin, steady veil outside, barely enough to stir the trees. Yet something in the floor vibrated, not constantly, just now and then. Like a distant hum felt more than heard. I would be reading or half dozing in the armchair by the fire, when the boards beneath me would buzz for a moment, then fall silent. Not creaking, vibrating. Like something deeper was waking, slowly. Then came the draft. Not cold, not sharp. Just a slow exhale of damp air that drifted into the room without warning. It wasn't from the windows. I checked. Every one of them sealed tight. Still, I'd catch the scent of something ancient. Wet stone and earth, and underneath that, mildew and something else. Something like memory. It always came from the far wall, the one lined with the heavy, dust-choked bookshelf. I hadn't paid the shelf much attention before. It was packed with old hardcovers, their spines faded to gold and brown ghosts. A few titles caught my eye: The Inland Sea, Echoes in Water, Lakes of the Forgotten World. I hadn't noticed how oddly curated it was. The whole shelf, it seemed, was dedicated to water. One evening, just after dusk, I stood before the shelf again. The vibrations had grown more frequent, and the draft stronger. I touched the wood along the edge. Cold, damp. I pressed lightly and felt the shelf shift. Not much, just a fraction of an inch, but enough. I braced my hands on either side and leaned in, carefully pushing. The bookshelf groaned, deep and slow, like a sleeping animal stirred from slumber. Then it slid, not easily but deliberately, inch by inch across the floor, revealing a wooden door set into the wall behind it. A door I had never seen. It was small, just tall enough for me to stoop through, and old, unpainted. The grain of the wood was raised like swollen veins. A simple iron latch held it shut. No lock. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the latch. That smell was stronger now. Stone and something metallic beneath it, like rust or old blood, but not quite. I opened the door. The hinges whispered as they moved, and a puff of air met my face, thick and cold, wrapping around me like a forgotten coat. Steps descended beyond the doorway. Narrow. One. Stone. Not a basement, not part of the house's blueprints, surely. This was older. A chamber built before the cottage itself, perhaps. Or beneath it. I stepped inside, one hand trailing along the damp wall as I descended. The air grew heavier with each step, like the atmosphere thickened the farther down I went. The chamber at the bottom was small, circular, carved entirely from rough stone. The ceiling was low enough that I had to duck slightly, and water dripped somewhere in the dark, echoing gently through the space. There was no furniture, no tools, just stone. And the drawings. They lined the walls like forgotten frescoes, childlike, crude in their execution, but powerful in their emotion. Crayons maybe, or charcoal, smudged over the years into soft, dreamlike outlines. Scenes of a lake, trees, a small boat, a child sitting at the end of a dock, legs dangling. Then, darker things. One picture showed the lake split open like a wound, with something rising from it, a tall, black shape, its arms too long, fingers stretching like roots through the water. Another showed the house. This house, half submerged, windows glowing underwater, like the dream I kept returning to. And in each image, the child was smaller, closer to the water's edge, closer to the thing. I stood frozen before one final drawing. A figure, child-sized, standing on the dock, looking down into the water. No monster, no boat, just the reflection. But it wasn't the same. The reflection had no eyes, just two dark, empty circles staring up. And in the corner of that picture, written in shaky letters, was a name. My name. I reached out with trembling fingers, brushing lightly against the drawing's edge. The wall was damp. The paper had half fused to the stone, but the letters were still clear. I stared at them a long while, the sound of water dripping, slow and steady, filling the silence around me. I had no memory of drawing these, no memory of ever being in this place. And yet, something about the pictures, the crayon strokes, the little looping letters, felt familiar, not like déjà vu, more like forgotten certainty. As if I'd left these here a long time ago, knowing one day I would find them again. A low creak sounded above, perhaps the wind or the old house settling, but it made me flinch. My heart pounded slowly, not from fear, but from the strange ache of recognition. I turned to leave, climbing the narrow steps back toward the door, the damp air brushing against my neck like breath. I could still feel the vibrations underfoot, subtle but constant now. A hum rising gently in the bones of the cottage. The bookshelf slid shut behind me, quieter this time, almost like it welcomed being moved. I stood in the living room, blinking in the firelight, listening to the whisper of rain outside. My fingers were damp, and when I looked down at them, they were smudged with charcoal. But I hadn't touched anything. Not really. The night was thick with rain, steady, soft, like a lullaby meant to soothe, yet somehow restless beneath its gentle rhythm. I lay in bed, half drifting in and out of sleep when I first heard it. The footsteps. Not on the wooden floorboards inside the cottage, no. That would have been normal, easily explained by a creak or a branch tapping the window. But these were different. They came from outside, from the lake. I listened carefully, breath slow and measured, the sound of rain mingling with the soft patter of something deliberate, slow and steady. Footsteps on water. The very idea sent a shiver down my spine, though I fought to keep calm. The sound was so faint, like the echo of a distant memory brushing against the edge of waking. Yet each step was distinct, deliberate, soft splashes rippling across the water's surface, pacing itself slowly from the center of the lake toward the dock. I slipped quietly from the bed and padded across the room to the window, careful not to disturb the stillness. Outside, the world blurred beneath the rain, droplets scattering on the glass like tiny prisms, distorting the view. But through the shimmering veil, I could see the lake, dark and deep, stretching out endlessly. And there, faint but undeniable, were ripples moving across the surface. An intricate, winding path from the heart of the lake to the dock where I had spent so many hours. There was no figure, no shadow, nothing but the steady spreading circles of water, folding into one another like the echoes of a forgotten song. I pressed my palm to the cool glass, trying to steady my racing thoughts. Who could be out there? The rain was too heavy, the night too quiet for anyone to be walking on the water, yet the footsteps continued, slow, steady, purposeful. I pulled back from the window, breath shallow but controlled. Returning to the small desk near the fire, I noticed the journal lying there, the old hand-bound book I'd found in the dresser. It had been closed, the pages still, the words silent. But now, the ink was moving. Letters darkened as if wet, shimmering faintly under the dim light. The pages seemed to ripple as if breathing. I leaned closer, heart tightening with an odd mixture of dread and fascination. The words formed slowly, deliberately, as if written by an unseen hand. Remember me. The letters glistened with moisture, ink pooling slightly at the edges. I touched the page gently, half expecting the words to dissolve, but they held firm. Remember me. The message was simple, yet I had no memory of who me could be. I sat back, the sound of the rain weaving through the room, mingling with the haunting echo of footsteps on water. The phrase lingered in my mind, twisting softly like a whispered secret carried on the wind. Who was I supposed to remember? My thoughts drifted back to the drawings in the stone chamber beneath the house. The child by the lake, the reflection without eyes, the dark shape reaching from the water. Was this message connected? Was it a plea? A warning? I tried to recall, but the memory was elusive, a fog pressing against the edges of my mind. Outside, the footsteps had ceased. The ripples gently faded into stillness, swallowed by the lake's vast silence. Yet the feeling remained, that strange aching pull, like something waiting just beyond sight, reaching through the rain, whispering through time. I closed the journal softly, the damp ink still fresh beneath my fingers. And as I lay back down, the rain tapping its slow rhythm on the roof, I realized I was no longer sure who was listening, or who I was meant to remember. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle by morning, a soft mist hanging over the garden as I stepped outside, drawn by a restless curiosity I couldn't shake. The damp earth gave under my boots, cool and rich, filling the air with that familiar scent of wet soil and moss. My eyes scanned the ground, lingering on the patches of wildflowers and tangled ivy creeping along the fence. There was something about this place, the way it seemed to breathe quietly beneath the layers of rain and time, that called to me, urging me to look deeper, to uncover what had been forgotten. As I wandered near the edge of the garden, something caught my eye, half buried beneath a cluster of ferns. It was small, a box, wooden and worn, its surface cracked with age, almost camouflaged by moss and dirt. Kneeling down, I carefully brushed away the damp leaves and earth. The box felt heavy in my hands, cold and smooth beneath the grime. It had no lock I could see, just a faint metal clasp holding it shut. I hesitated a moment before lifting the lid. Inside, nestled in a bed of faded velvet, was a photograph. The edges curled and yellowed, a relic from another time. The image was of a boy, standing at the very dock I had come to know so well. He was staring intently into the dark water, his face turned away just enough to obscure his features in shadow. But the shape, the posture, the unmistakable curve of his hair, it was me, or a version of me. Yet the strangest part was the feeling it stirred, a pull at the edge of my mind, like a memory half remembered but just out of reach. I stared longer, tracing the outline of the boy's coat, the way his feet hovered just above the wooden planks, as if he might step into the lake at any moment. Turning the photo over, my fingers trembling slightly, I found a name scrawled in faded ink on the back. It wasn't mine. The letters were unfamiliar, yet somehow painfully intimate. A name that didn't belong to who I thought I was. I sat back against the garden wall, the damp creeping through my jeans, and let the silence stretch out around me. How could this be? Was I looking at someone else's past, or was it my own, hidden beneath layers of forgotten time? The line between memory and identity blurred, a soft haze creeping across the edges of my mind like the morning mist over the lake. I thought of the journal's last entry, "It's listening." Was the house more than just old wood and stone? Had it chosen me to remember what I could not? The photograph felt heavier now, pressing against my palm like a secret waiting to be told. I closed the box gently, the weight of the unknown settling inside me like the rain soaking the earth, quiet, persistent, and impossible to ignore. That night, the rain returned with a whisper, and I lay awake wondering what it meant to lose yourself in a place that seemed to already know you. The morning rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, the kind that wraps the world in a quiet white veil. A strange stillness had settled in me, a calm that felt more like surrender than peace. Drawn by something I couldn't name, I found myself carrying the small rowboat down to the water's edge. The lake, a vast mirror beneath the low-hanging clouds, seemed to breathe beneath the pale light, waiting. The oars slipped into the water with gentle, rhythmic splashes, each stroke breaking the surface in near silence. Rain pattered around me, a constant, soothing murmur, wrapping the world in a curtain of white noise. It was as if the rain followed me, creating a small bubble of quiet around the boat, cocooning me in a fragile stillness. The shore disappeared slowly, fading into mist. The dock, the house, the trees, all dissolved into gray. Out here, surrounded by the vast lake, the world felt distant, dreamlike. I kept rowing until the boat drifted into the center, where the water was deepest and darkest. I let the oars rest. The boat rocked softly beneath me, and the rain continued its gentle song. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs, and then, without hesitation, I slid into the water. The chill bit at my skin, sharp and alive. The surface rippled gently as I sank beneath it, the world above dimming into a distant echo. The rain's steady rhythm muffled into a soft hum underwater, like a heartbeat in the silence. Below, the lake opened into darkness, thick and endless. But as I swam deeper, shapes began to take form, emerging from the shadows like forgotten memories surfacing. There, beneath the murky water, stood the ruins of a house. It was a perfect mirror of the cottage above. Stone walls worn smooth by time, wooden beams softened with moss, windows dark and empty like blind eyes. The lake had swallowed it whole, covering it with water and secrets. I reached out, fingers grazing the cold stone of a doorframe. The surface was slick with algae, rough with years of neglect, yet unmistakably solid. Touching it, a flood of images swept through me, laughter echoing faintly, children's voices carried on the wind, a sharp intake of breath, the choking panic of drowning. I realized with a start that these were not just memories but something deeper, something buried inside me. I had lived here once, or at least something inside me had. A life submerged beneath the lake's surface, hidden beneath layers of silence and time. The water around me felt alive, whispering secrets I could almost understand. The rain above continued its steady song, muffled by the thick layer of water separating two worlds, one above, one below. I swam back up slowly, breaking the surface with a gasp, the cold air filling my lungs. The boat rocked gently, waiting for me. As I climbed back in, the mist closed behind me, swallowing the ruins once more beneath the lake's dark calm. And yet, I knew, somewhere beneath the still water, my past was waiting. The rain falls steady outside, a soft, rhythmic murmur against the window pane, like a lullaby sung by the earth itself. It's been this way for hours now, quiet and gentle, a steady drizzle that seems to wash away everything sharp or urgent, leaving only a slow, smooth calm. I sit by the dim light of the old lamp, the shadows stretching lazily across the walls, and the house seems to breathe around me, slow and deep, as if it were alive in its own way. I don't think about leaving anymore. The urge has faded like a whisper lost in the wind. Instead, I feel like I belong here, or more precisely, that I've always belonged. The house, the lake, the mist, the rain, they are all part of me now, and I a part of them. It's a strange kind of surrender, soft and endless, like sinking into warm water and letting the current carry you where it will. When I look in the mirrors scattered throughout the rooms, the reflections don't startle me anymore. They shimmer faintly like ripples on water, and sometimes if I watch long enough, the surface seems to ripple outward, revealing not just my face but something deeper, something waiting beneath the stillness. I don't try to understand it, not anymore. The image is both mine and not mine, a layered echo that belongs to the house, to the lake, to the memories that flow like water through the walls. My mind drifts easily now, following the rhythm of the rain and the lake's gentle breathing. The memories come softly, like fragments of half-remembered dreams, laughter carried on the wind, the splash of cold water, shadows moving just beyond sight. There's no fear in them, just a quiet knowing that these moments are part of a cycle older than I am, something eternal and patient. I trace my fingers over the worn wood of the table, feeling the grain beneath my skin, the coolness that the rain seeps into every corner of this place. There's a smell here that lingers, damp wood, moss, and something older still, like the scent of deep water untouched by time. It fills the air quietly, wrapping around me like a shawl, comforting and strange. Outside, the lake stretches wide and calm, its surface smooth as glass, reflecting the dim light of the clouds above. The mist hangs low, a soft veil that blurs the line between water and sky. I listen to the rain tapping on the roof, the faint lapping of the water against the dock, and the slow sighs that seem to come from the walls themselves. It's as if the house listens with me, waiting patiently for the next story, the next name it will hold. I realize now that the house does not forget. It doesn't let go. It holds on to the echoes of those who have passed through, folding their voices into the quiet spaces, into the rhythm of the rain and the lake. It waits, silently, for the next visitor, the next soul whose memories will flow into its depths like a river into the sea. There's a calmness in that waiting. A gentle invitation whispered on the wind, soft as a breath. Come, rest, remember. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, I think I can hear whispers beneath the surface of the lake, voices carried by the water just beyond the edge of hearing. They speak in a language I almost understand, like words half remembered from a dream. I don't try to listen too hard. The knowing that they are there is enough. The nights pass slowly here, wrapped in the steady rhythm of rain and shadow. I lie awake sometimes, watching the faint flicker of light across the water, the way the mist clings to the trees like a secret. The house holds me gently in its arms, a silent guardian of memories and echoes. I don't fear the dark anymore. The shadows are soft, slow, shifting like smoke in the breeze. They are not empty or cold, but alive with stories. Stories of those who came before, who sank beneath the surface, whose names have been folded into the silence. I am part of those stories now, an echo within the quiet chorus of the house and lake. I carry their whispers with me, gentle and unending. If you ever find yourself near a quiet lake on a rainy night, where the mist hangs low and the world feels still, listen closely. Listen for the soft ripple of water, the faint footsteps on the shore, the gentle sigh of a house waiting in the dark. And if you hear your name whispered on the wind, don't be afraid. The house will be there waiting. The rain will fall steady, and the lake will hold you calm and deep. I am here. I am the echo. Are you still awake then moving to the next story? The drizzle had been steady all afternoon, soft and persistent, like a secret the sky wanted to share without ever raising its voice. As I turned off the winding forest road, the gravel crunched faintly beneath the tires, swallowed quickly by the damp earth. The world around me felt muted. The dense elms, tall and still, stood like silent sentinels, their branches barely stirring in the cool, moist air. The mist lay low over the landscape, a delicate veil weaving through the trunks and swirling just above the ground. I could smell the rich scent of wet earth and moss, mingled with something older, a faint, almost forgotten trace of decay and quiet growth. It was a smell that rooted me immediately, like the deep breath you take when stepping into a place you're meant to find, even if you don't quite know why. I'd been chasing silence for months. The city's constant hum, the ceaseless noise in my head, it all grew too loud, too restless. I needed to escape, to find a refuge where the day's chaos could dissolve into something softer, slower. When I found this cottage, nestled at the edge of the forest beside the ancient elm grove, it felt like an answer whispered on the wind. The house itself was small, made of weathered wood that had long forgotten the touch of paint or polish. The windows, framed by creeping ivy, reflected the gray sky with a tired kind of patience. It didn't look like much to the casual passerby, but to me it promised something rare, stillness. And maybe, just maybe, a place where the restless parts of my mind could finally rest. I stepped out into the mist, the rain clinging gently to my jacket, and took a slow breath. The air was cool, with that fresh, clean quality that only rain and trees can create together. Around me, the elms loomed, their limbs sprawling wide, their bark rough and ancient beneath my fingertips as I brushed past. There was a whisper carried on the breeze, so soft I wasn't sure if I was hearing it or imagining. It was like the sound of old voices, barely audible, mixing with the rustle of leaves and the drip-drip of raindrops gathering and falling again. The kind of whisper that brushes the edges of your mind, teasing you with the suggestion of something just out of reach. I walked slowly toward the front door, my boots soft against the mossy ground. The path was barely visible through the mist, a thin thread leading me home. Each step felt heavier and lighter all at once, as if the air itself was thick with waiting, holding its breath for something that hadn't yet come. Inside, the cottage smelled of damp wood and faintly of the smoke from an old fireplace, though there was no fire burning now. The walls creaked softly as the house settled around me, and I found myself pausing in the quiet, listening. The only sounds were the rain tapping gently on the roof and the soft hum of the wind threading through the cracks. I ran my fingers along the wooden beams overhead, feeling the grain smooth and worn, and sat by the window to watch the rain fall in shimmering curtains outside. The lake wasn't far beyond the trees, its surface hidden beneath the mist, but I could hear the faint lapping of water against the shore, steady and unhurried. The quiet settled deep inside me, like the slow sinking of a stone into a still pond. It was strange and comforting all at once, a gentle unfolding of calm after so long in the noise. Yet beneath that calm I could sense something else, something hidden beneath the soft rain and the thick mist, like a secret waiting patiently beneath the roots of those towering elms. As the daylight faded, the mist grew heavier, wrapping the world in a soft gray shawl. I stood on the porch and breathed in again, feeling the cool droplets settle on my skin. The whispering on the breeze came again, faint but unmistakable this time, threading through the leaves like a sigh. I wasn't alone here. Not quite. But it wasn't a presence to fear. It was something quieter, older, a gentle invitation to listen, to remember, to become part of this place where time seemed to pause. So I stayed there a little longer, watching the rain fall, letting the silence soak into my bones. The elm branches swayed gently overhead, their shadows shifting softly in the growing dusk, and I whispered back into the wind, "I'm here." And the world held its breath, waiting. Night settled over the cottage like a thick velvet curtain, drawing the day into silence. The rain was steady now, a soft, persistent tapping against the roof that filled the empty spaces with a gentle rhythm. It was the kind of sound that could lull the mind into quiet, or open it just enough to hear things that otherwise might go unnoticed. I lay still on the narrow bed, the thin blanket pulled up around my shoulders. The room was dim, lit only by the flickering glow of a lone candle on the bedside table, its flame casting shadows that danced softly against the wood-paneled walls. Outside, the elms whispered faintly, their branches swaying with the wind, creaking like slow breaths taken deep from the earth. At first there was only the rain. Tap, 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 a steady, soothing cadence that seemed to breathe with the pulse of the house itself. My eyelids grew heavy, and I let my thoughts drift, carried on the sound of water falling through the night. But then, almost imperceptibly, something shifted. A faint sound slipped through the narrow cracks around the window frame, softer than the rain, more fragile than the wind. It was like a sigh, or maybe a single whispered name, spoken so quietly I couldn't quite catch the words. It fluttered in the air, just beyond reach, like a moth brushing past the candle's flame and vanishing before I could follow. I opened my eyes fully and sat up slowly, listening. The room was still except for the rain and the occasional creak of wood settling in the cool night air. My heart had quieted from the day's rush, but now it beat with a gentle, tentative rhythm, as if the house itself was breathing alongside me. The voice, or whatever it was, did not come again. I strained to hear, willing the sound to return, but only the steady patter of rain answered me, the soft moan of the elm branches rubbing against one another in the breeze. It was as if the whisper had been a secret shared in passing, a breath of something unseen. I lay back down, pulling the blanket higher and closing my eyes once more. My thoughts wandered to the day's journey here, the winding forest road, the smell of moss and wet earth, the quiet promise of solitude. I had come here to escape, to find a place where silence wasn't just the absence of noise, but something alive, something waiting to be heard. But now I wondered if silence was more complicated than that. The whisper, faint and fleeting, had stirred something in the stillness, something old, patient, and watchful. It was not a call to fear, but an invitation to listen deeper, to lean into the spaces between sounds where meaning might hide. Outside, the rain continued its steady song. The window pane rattled slightly in the draft, and I could hear the soft scratch of branches against the glass. The house seemed to breathe with the night, pulsing softly in time with the rain, the whispers just beyond the edge of hearing. I thought about the countless nights this place must have seen, the quiet moments folded into its walls like layers of old paper. What stories had been told here in whispers? What names had been spoken in the dark, only to vanish with the dawn? I wanted to reach out, to understand the voice that had slipped past me like a ghost, but all I could do was listen. And so I lay there, suspended between wakefulness and sleep, caught in the gentle rhythm of rain and shadow. The first whisper had come and gone, but its memory lingered like a breath against my skin. As my eyelids finally fluttered closed, I held that fragile sound with me, letting it weave into the quiet dark, and the rain kept falling. The next day unfolded in a soft haze, the rain lingering like a gentle curtain outside the windows. I decided to explore the cottage more thoroughly, drawn by an unspoken urge to uncover its quiet stories, to listen to the echoes that hid beneath the familiar creaks and sighs. The house felt alive in a way that was subtle but undeniable. Every floorboard hummed with memory, every shadow seemed to hold a whisper just beneath the surface. I moved slowly, deliberately, letting my fingers brush against the rough wood of the walls and the faded wallpaper that peeled in slow, curling strips. It was behind one of those strips, in a corner near the old fireplace, where the wallpaper hung loose, that I found them. Nestled in the darkness like secret treasures were a handful of letters and faded photographs, their edges softened and worn by time. I carefully peeled them out, the paper brittle between my fingers, smelling faintly of dust and damp. The letters were yellowed, written in neat, looping script that had softened with age. They spoke in quiet tones about the changing seasons, the solitude of the elm trees, and an unshakable feeling of waiting. None of the words were alarming, but they carried a weight, a subtle tension that hummed beneath their calm surface. I turned my attention to the photographs. They were black and white, a little blurry around the edges like memories half remembered. The people in the images, men, women, children, all faced the large elm tree that stood just beyond the cottage's window, their eyes fixed not on the camera, but somewhere beyond it, as if waiting for something unseen. Their expressions were strange too, a mixture of anticipation and quiet unease. I studied each face closely, feeling the faint pull of recognition, even though I knew I'd never met these people. It was as if the elm itself held them in its gaze, binding them to the house and the land in a way that neither time nor distance could sever. As I sat there on the creaky wooden floor, the whispers returned. This time they were clearer, not words I could understand, but sounds like soft breath and distant sighs, curling around the room like a thick, invisible fog. They wrapped the house in a quiet tension, filling the spaces between the raindrops and the slow creak of wood settling. I found myself holding my breath, listening with a stillness that felt both reverent and fragile. The whispers were not threatening, far from it. They were patient, as if waiting for me to understand, to hear what had been waiting here long before I arrived. The air grew cooler, the dampness deepening around me. I could smell the mingled scent of wet earth and old paper, of moss creeping through cracks in the floorboards, and the faint, almost imperceptible hint of something older, something like forgotten time itself. I pressed the photographs gently to my chest, feeling the weight of countless silent years pressing softly against my skin. The house seemed to breathe with me, the walls pulsing faintly like a heartbeat beneath my fingertips. Outside, the rain continued its steady, calming rhythm. The elm branches scratched softly against the window pane, as if the tree itself was leaning closer, curious and patient. I knew then that the whispers were not simply echoes of the past. They were part of the house's soul, an endless conversation woven through the wood and stone, waiting for the next voice to join in. I closed my eyes and let the quiet tension settle around me like a soft blanket, the whispers wrapping me in their gentle embrace. And the rain kept falling. That night, as the rain pattered softly against the roof and the elm branches whispered outside the window, I lay awake in the quiet stillness of the cottage. The darkness was thick but not heavy, more like a gentle curtain holding me close. Somewhere deep beneath the calm surface of the house, a subtle rhythm stirred. At first, I thought it was my own heartbeat, slow, steady, almost comforting. But soon I noticed something else. A faint vibration, a delicate pulsing beneath the soles of my feet, as if the very ground was breathing. I shifted, laying my hand on the floor, feeling the subtle tremble ripple up through the old wooden boards. It was unlike anything I'd felt before. Not quite alive in the usual way, but alive all the same, a soft, measured pulse that seemed to echo from the earth itself. The air was heavy with dampness and the scent of moss and wet wood, but beneath that was another smell, earthy and rich, like roots twisting through the dark soil just beneath the house. Compelled by a mixture of unease and curiosity, I got out of bed and moved slowly through the dimly lit room, my bare feet making almost no sound on the cold floor. I knelt down near the center where the vibrations seemed strongest. My fingers traced the grain of the floorboards, feeling their roughness, their age. And then I noticed it, a slight irregularity in the wood, a panel that didn't quite match the rest. It was hidden beneath a thin layer of soil and tangled roots that had somehow crept inside, threading their way through cracks in the foundation. The roots were thick and dark, curling gently like sleeping snakes beneath my fingertips. I hesitated, my breath shallow, but slowly, carefully, I brushed away the loose earth and twisted vines. The edges of a trapdoor became visible, old, weathered, and sealed tight as if meant to keep something hidden far below. I pressed my palm against the wood, feeling the coldness seep into my skin. The smell of damp earth grew stronger, and the faint pulse beneath my hand seemed to quicken, like the house was breathing with me, alive in ways I could barely understand. The rain outside softened to a whisper, the night holding its breath with me. I imagined what might lie beneath. Forgotten rooms, lost memories, secrets buried deep beneath the roots of the ancient elm. The thought sent a chill through me, but it was not fear. It was something quieter, a kind of reverent awe mixed with an aching sense of something waiting, something patient. I traced the edges of the trapdoor again, fingers trembling slightly, sensing the weight of whatever lay beneath, sealed away for decades or perhaps centuries. The roots seemed to pulse, as if guarding this hidden place, whispering in a language just beyond hearing. As I sat back on my heels, the rain picked up again, drumming softly on the roof, wrapping the house in a gentle, rhythmic lullaby. The vibration beneath the floorboards slowed once more, settling into the steady pulse of the night. I knew then that the house wasn't just shelter. It was a living memory, and beneath those floorboards, something old and quiet waited in the dark, breathing beneath the roots. Slowly, I returned to bed, the whispers of the earth echoing softly in my mind. The rain sang me a lullaby as I drifted towards sleep, the mystery of the trapdoor waiting quietly in the shadows. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm, a soft, endless tapping against the roof and window panes that wrapped the cottage in a cocoon of quiet. Each day that the sky stayed heavy with clouds, I found myself caught in something I couldn't quite grasp. Faint fragments of voices, like whispers carried on the damp breeze weaving through the elm branches outside. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks, or the echo of my own restless mind filling the silence. But there was something more, something subtle and persistent, stories, murmured in a language I almost understood but never fully could. The voices felt like echoes of long ago, soft and slow, telling of loss and hope, of waiting and remembering. In the mornings when I woke, the edges of my dreams clung to me like mist. Faces appeared in those dreams, strangers framed by the swaying branches of the elm tree, their eyes deep and knowing, filled with stories I had never heard but somehow felt I should. Sometimes their expressions held a gentle sadness, sometimes a quiet longing, and sometimes the barest hint of a smile, as if they were waiting for me to remember. The boundary between waking and dreaming grew thin, like walking along the edge of a soft shadow, where light and dark blur together. In those moments, I wasn't sure if I was listening to the rain or to the stories hidden within it. Sometimes when I closed my eyes, I could almost hear the whispered names, soft as sighs, weaving through the patter of droplets. One evening, sitting by the window with the rain painting streaks down the glass, I tried to focus on those voices. They felt close, almost within reach, but when I leaned in to listen, they slipped away like smoke, leaving only the steady rhythm of rain and the occasional creak of the elm branches. The air inside the cottage smelled faintly of wet earth and moss, mixed with something older, a subtle scent that seemed to carry the weight of all those stories, waiting patiently in the damp corners of the room. I ran my fingers along the windowsill, tracing patterns where the water had collected, and wondered if the house itself held the memories, whispering them out softly with every storm. That night, as I drifted into sleep, the rain sang its quiet song, and the voices returned, this time clearer, softer, closer. I felt as if I was floating just above the surface of those whispered tales, suspended between this world and the next. Faces appeared once more, their eyes meeting mine, filled with the weight of things unsaid and stories untold. I woke with the faint taste of rain on my lips and a deep, peaceful ache in my chest. Somewhere in the quiet, I understood that these voices were not just echoes of the past, but part of the house, the elm, the rain, all waiting for someone to listen, to remember, and I found myself wanting to listen forever. The elm stood like a silent sentinel beside the cottage, its broad branches stretching high, tangled in the gray sky. One afternoon, after the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, I found myself drawn outside, pulled by a quiet insistence I couldn't name. The air was thick with the scent of damp leaves and earth, and a faint melody seemed to weave itself through the rustling canopy above me. At first, I thought it was only the wind, soft, swirling around the branches like a secret breath. But as I settled beneath the tree's vast shade, the sound deepened into something more. It was a gentle hum, a soothing lullaby that seemed woven into the leaves themselves. Not a tune I recognized, but one that felt ancient and familiar, like a song sung before time was measured. The melody was slow and calm, rising and falling like the soft rocking of a cradle. It wrapped around me, a tender embrace that softened the edges of the restless thoughts still clinging to my mind. I closed my eyes and let the hum seep into my skin, into the spaces between my ribs, and felt a deep, quiet warmth settle in my chest. As I sat there, I noticed something else, a subtle vibration beneath my fingertips where they touched the roots curling through the mossy ground. The earth pulsed faintly like the steady beat of a heart, and I felt a curious tug, a silent call reaching from the depths beneath that ancient tree. It was both comforting and strange, as if the elm itself was speaking without words. The air around me seemed to hum with unseen life, and I sensed an old warning hidden in the melody, a caution not spoken aloud, but carried like a shadow beneath the song's soft beauty. The elm's roots reached deep and wide, holding secrets buried beneath the surface, stories whispered in the language of rain and soil. I stayed beneath the tree long after the rain had stopped, listening to the song that lived in the rustling leaves. The sky dimmed, and the first stars began to blink through the thinning mist, but the lullaby continued, slow, steady, a quiet tether pulling me closer to the earth and its unseen depths. There was a peace in that song, but also a subtle unease, a reminder that some songs are meant to be heard only at certain times, and by those who are willing to listen carefully. I felt, somehow, that the elm was watching me, waiting for something, or someone, to answer its silent call. As the night deepened, I rose slowly, leaving the elm's embrace behind, but carrying the memory of its song with me, a haunting melody that would drift softly through my dreams, guiding me back to that ancient, whispering presence. The days passed quietly, each one wrapped in a gentle shroud of mist and drizzle, but I began to notice small, subtle things, things that didn't quite fit. One morning, I woke to find my favorite chair slightly turned from its usual place, the fabric-worn edges catching the soft morning light in a way that made it seem new again. I was sure I had left it facing the window the night before, staring out toward the elm. Yet there it was, subtly shifted, as if someone else had needed to sit and watch the rain. The kitchen table held a spoon I didn't recognize, resting beside my usual cup. It was polished but old, the handle etched with delicate swirls that caught the dim light just so. I didn't remember moving it, nor had I brought it in. The feeling of another presence in the house crept softly, like the hush between raindrops. Outside, the earth was soft and yielding after another steady shower. I wandered through the garden, drawn to the smell of wet moss and fresh soil. There, in the damp earth near the elm's roots, I found footprints. Small, too light for any adult, and unsteady in their pattern. The prints seemed fresh, delicate impressions pressed lightly into the mud. They trailed from the base of the tree to the edge of the porch and disappeared, as if whoever had made them stepped silently away. There was no fear in these signs, only a patient waiting, like a breath held in the cool air. I felt the presence close, not urgent or threatening, but quiet and watchful. Sometimes late at night, I would hear a faint shuffle, a barely audible sigh slipping through the cracks of the old wooden floor. I would lie still, breathing softly, listening for more. The house seemed to breathe with me, the very walls humming with a gentle energy that I couldn't explain. It was as if the unseen visitors shared the space quietly, moving through shadows and light with a grace that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. They weren't here to scare me, I realized. They were waiting for something lost, something hidden beneath the layers of time and memory. Once I found an old scarf, soft and faded, draped over the back of a chair where I had never placed it. The fabric smelled faintly of rain and wood smoke. It was a silent message, a reminder that I was not alone in this place. I began to speak quietly into the empty rooms, soft words meant for ears I couldn't see. The voices never answered, but I felt them listen. Some nights, the rain's rhythm seemed to shift, slower, deeper, almost like a pulse in tune with my own heartbeat. And in those moments, I sensed the presence closer still, just beyond the veil of what could be seen or touched. Patient, timeless, waiting for the day I would understand what was meant to be remembered or what needed to be gently released. The air in the cottage was thick with stories, old stories told in silence and shadow. And though the visitors were unseen, their patience felt like a warm, fragile thread weaving through the quiet nights, holding me here, tethered softly to a secret just beyond reach. That morning, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and the air smelled rich and earthy, as if the forest itself was exhaling after a long sleep. Drawn again to the elm, I found myself kneeling near its ancient roots, the damp soil cool beneath my fingers. Something caught my eye, a small glint buried beneath a cluster of moss and tangled roots. Carefully, I brushed away the dirt, revealing a weathered nameplate, its metal worn smooth by time. The letters were faint but still readable, a name I didn't recognize, yet it felt strangely familiar, like a distant echo of a whisper I'd once heard in a dream. The name seemed to hum softly in my mind, vibrating with a quiet insistence that unsettled me gently, as if the name itself was a key to something just beyond reach. I held the nameplate in my hands, cold and heavy, and for a moment, memories surfaced, fragments of moments I had never lived. Faces I didn't know, laughter that wasn't mine, and a soft voice calling out from beneath the elm's sprawling branches. These flashes slipped away as quickly as they came, leaving me with a quiet ache of something lost, something forgotten. I wandered back inside the cottage, the nameplate still clutched loosely, and sat by the window, watching rain trace delicate paths down the glass. The world outside seemed muted, filtered through a veil of mist and memory. I tried to piece together the fleeting images, the half-remembered feelings that brushed the edges of my mind like a soft breeze. Who was I before this? Or rather, who had I been? The nameplate felt like a tether, pulling me toward a past I didn't know I had. I wondered if the elm held secrets not just in its roots but in the stories of those who had come before me, those who had lived and faded away beneath its watchful branches. The idea made the room feel both smaller and infinitely larger, like I was part of something much older and deeper than my own fleeting life. That night, the whispers returned, softer now but unmistakable. They carried that name, sometimes a sigh, sometimes a breath, always just out of understanding. I tried to speak it aloud, feeling the syllables roll gently over my tongue, as if speaking the name might unlock the memories hidden beneath the soil and rain. Sleep came slowly, wrapped in the sound of steady rain and the faint hum of the elm's unseen song. Dreams wrapped around me like a cool, dark river, pulling me deeper into the tangled roots of time. Faces emerged from the shadows, eyes bright and watching, lips moving without sound. I reached for them, but the dream slipped away, leaving only the echo of that forgotten name in my heart. I woke with a quiet certainty that I was no longer just a visitor in this place. The elm and the cottage and the rain, they were part of me now and I part of their story. But what that story was, I could only guess. The nameplate lay on the bedside table, a silent invitation to remember, or perhaps to forget again, as the rain whispered softly outside, carrying secrets too old to speak aloud. The rain had softened to a mist, a quiet breath that wrapped the world in a muted hush. Drawn once again to the elm, I felt the familiar tug in my chest, the whispered invitation I could no longer ignore. The ground beneath the tree seemed alive, pulsing faintly, as if it held its own slow heartbeat beneath the soil. I knelt down, hands trembling slightly, and began to brush away the damp earth from the base of the gnarled roots. There, half hidden beneath layers of moss and tangled leaves, I uncovered a hollow, small and deep, a secret cavity carved out by time and nature's patient hands. Inside, nestled carefully, lay a collection of tokens: a rusted locket, a cracked porcelain doll's hand, a faded ribbon tied in a loose knot, and a handful of yellowed letters, their edges curled and soft. Each item seemed charged with a quiet energy, like fragments of a life suspended between memory and forgetting. I reached in slowly, fingers grazing the objects, and a sudden flood of sensation washed over me, like plunging into a pool of cold, dark water and being carried by currents not my own. Emotions surged, joy, fear, longing, and a bittersweet ache I couldn't place. Vivid visions danced behind my closed eyelids, a child's laughter echoing through sunlit rooms, the gentle rocking of a cradle, the whisper of a mother's lullaby carried on the wind. I saw faces I didn't recognize but felt intimately connected to, their eyes full of stories begging to be told. The locket slipped open in my hand, revealing a tiny, faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a sad smile. The porcelain hand seemed fragile yet oddly warm, as if it had once held something precious. The letters whispered secrets in a language only my heart could understand, tales of love and loss, of waiting and hoping beneath the elm's ancient watch. I sat back against the rough bark, the tokens resting lightly in my lap, and let the rain's steady rhythm cradle my thoughts. The hollow beneath the elm wasn't just a hidden space, it was a vessel, a keeper of memories that refused to fade into silence. I realized then that this forgotten life was not so distant from my own. It was woven into the same roots, the same earth and rain and quiet shadows that now held me. The visions lingered as the evening deepened, and I felt a profound connection stretch across time, linking me to those who had come before, to the stories etched in the soil beneath the elm's sprawling branches. The whispers grew softer, more like a gentle song, a lullaby of remembrance and peace. I breathed in the scent of wet earth and old wood, letting the quiet settle deep within me. There was no rush, no need to unravel everything at once. Beneath the elm, time seemed to slow, folding inward like the petals of a night-blooming flower. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the quiet mystery of the hollow and the stories it held, the rain a soft steady pulse around me, lulling me deeper into dreams where the past and present entwined, and the forgotten life waited patiently to be remembered once more. The rain has softened to a gentle rhythm now, a steady patter that seems less like falling water and more like the heartbeat of the earth itself, soft, constant, and deeply comforting. Sitting here beneath the elm, I feel wrapped in something ancient, something that stretches beyond time and space. The night is quiet except for the gentle rustling of leaves and the subtle susurrus of the rain falling on the thick canopy above. It feels like the world has slowed, as if the elm and I are sharing a breath together, long and slow, connecting us to something far greater than myself. I reach out my hand and brush it along the rough bark of the elm's trunk. Its surface is cold and firm, but beneath that hardness I can almost sense a pulse, a faint vibration running deep into the earth. It's as if the tree itself is alive in a way I hadn't understood before. Not just a living thing, but a keeper of stories, a guardian of secrets buried in soil and shadow. The whispers that danced at the edges of my hearing over these past days have quieted, settling into a soft, constant hum. They no longer press or demand, but instead soothe, like the delicate hum of a lullaby sung long ago, beneath a sky much like this one. The whispering is not words anymore. It's feeling, a presence I can sense curling around me like the mist, lingering in the spaces between raindrops. It's as if the elm's roots have stretched their fingers through time, touching memories I didn't know I had, connecting me to the past lives that once called this place home. I'm no longer just a visitor here. I am part of the story, part of the quiet embrace that has held this land through centuries of rain and silence. It's strange, this feeling of belonging. I came here seeking refuge from the noise of the city, from the tangled thoughts that never let me rest. But what I've found is something different, a stillness not of absence, but of presence. The kind of presence that waits patiently, knowing all things must eventually come to rest. The elm, the rain, the whispers, they are not trying to scare or chase me away. They are inviting me to listen, to remember, to become part of the calm. As I sit here, the damp earth beneath my feet smells rich and alive, a mixture of wet moss, fallen leaves, and something deeper, the scent of old memories settling like dust. The rain's rhythm lulls my mind into a slow, gentle wander. Thoughts that once raced now drift like soft clouds, and I find myself breathing more easily, sinking into the night's quiet embrace. I think about the stories I heard in the rain, those faint fragments carried on the wind, tales of loss, hope, and waiting that seem to float just beyond understanding. Those voices, those echoes, they no longer feel like ghosts but like threads weaving through the fabric of this place. They speak not just of what was, but of what still is, quietly holding space beneath the elm's sprawling branches. There's a tenderness to it all, not cold or empty but alive with an ancient kind of love. The elm's song, the whispering rain, the slow pulse of the earth beneath us. They form a gentle chorus that fills the spaces inside me where restlessness once lived. It is here, in this fragile balance between shadow and light, between past and present, that I find something I had long forgotten, the peace of surrender. I imagine the lives that passed through this place, the hands that planted the elms, the feet that once tread softly on this soil, the voices that once told stories beside a fire. Their presence lingers still, like a breath held just beneath the surface, waiting to be exhaled in a quiet moment like this. I feel their stories brush against me like a warm wind, carrying the weight of years and the softness of rain. The rain begins to fall a little heavier again, a gentle tapping on the leaves and roof above me. Each drop seems to echo in the silence, a steady reminder that time flows on, slow, inevitable, like a river carving its way through stone. And in this flowing time, I realize that the elm's whispers are not just memories or shadows. They are a kind of invitation, to pause, to listen, to let the quiet wash over me until I am no longer separate from it. I speak softly now, almost as if the words might disturb the delicate balance. I am here, I say. I am listening. And in the stillness that follows, I feel a response. Not in words, but in the shift of air, the rustle of leaves, the deep, steady heartbeat of rain falling on earth and root. The night deepens, wrapping me in its cool embrace. My breath slows further, matching the rhythm of the rain, the whispering elm, the earth's patient song. I am no longer trying to understand or resist. I am simply here, part of the quiet, part of the story that stretches beyond the reach of time. I want to tell you, the listener, that this place is waiting for you too. If ever you find yourself beneath an ancient elm, on a rainy evening when the world feels hushed and slow, listen carefully. The whispers might come to you, faint, soft, carrying stories that do not end, memories that sleep beneath the leaves. They do not rush or shout, they wait patiently for someone to hear. You don't have to be afraid. There is no darkness here, only the gentle folding of past and present, the slow weaving of stories in the rain. The elm holds them all in its roots and branches, in the soft murmur of leaves stirred by the wind. And if you listen long enough, you might feel the same quiet embrace, the same peaceful surrender that I have found. I'm no longer just a visitor here. I am part of the song beneath the elm, part of the rain's steady rhythm. The whispers have become a gentle voice inside me, a soft reminder that some stories never truly end. They live on in the spaces between raindrops, in the rustle of leaves, in the quiet heartbeat of earth and root. So if you hear that faint whisper, if you feel the rain's gentle call, know that you are not alone. The elm is always here, waiting and listening. And in that waiting, there is a kind of peace, slow like the rain falling steadily in the night. I will stay here a while longer, wrapped in this whisper's embrace, breathing with the elm, sleeping with the rain. And when the morning comes, the story will still be here, waiting quietly beneath the branches. A lullaby for those who need it, a memory for those who listen, a gentle song that carries on forever.